morning, noon, evening or night, depending when you're watching this video. My name is Legend and welcome back to World of Tanks and the Look Back at series. Where today we take a look back at the Operation Overlord, the single player battle scenario inspired by the real events of D-Day during World War II. We have seen some other PvE game modes over the past few years. Think of Homefront or the Waffenträger event or Mirny. However, next to the tutorial and topography game modes, this is the first time a solo option has been added as a special PvE game mode, which isn't just a basic introduction to the game. You also had the introduction of the story modes alongside with Operational Overlord, but those fall more into the introduction game mode or understanding how fighting alone against computer generated enemies is going to be like in the operation. It gives some perspective on how the general developments in this type of game modes are currently going, and also gives us an indication what the potential is for future developments for future solo PvE game modes. So okay, the first single player PvE World of Tanks experience isn't you just one versus many throughout the whole battle scenario. You alongside AI driven allies against computer controlled enemies. Sounds just like the random queue on the weekends actually. Just kidding. The enemies would be the AI and my teammates would be the computer controlled ones. Most of the times the enemy teams seem to be just a bit more capable during those times. But jokes aside, continuing the overview of the Overlord map, you traverse throughout coastal defenses and minefields, securing areas and targeting coastal bunkers, all the while fighting off the enemy, which leads to a final face-off against a set of 3 waves of stronger and stronger enemy tanks. So first of all, this wasn't like any tutorial game mode. This was an actual challenge. It really felt, especially when playing for the first time, like you were up against some impossible odds. Being stuck on the beach in a corner until you got rid of some bunkers and the minesweeper could clear the way. Especially if you take as long as me to realize that your battleship artillery would only fire if you yourself are firing at the targets. Later on, you could use the same allied artillery with markings that you place at your own control. This was quite a good mechanic in order to pace the progression correctly, because if you have it one way, you could fire for tens of minutes at those bunkers, hitting the weak spot 10% of the time, or the other way, just blast at free will throughout many coastal bunkers in just a minute. So the general pacing was quite well balanced. But I also need to address the elephant in the room, and that is your own AI allied vehicles. In order to succeed in the mission, your AI team needs to stay alive. If they get all killed, you lose. This had led to some very tense moments where my team threw the victory away in the final assault, in the harder difficulty level. Speaking of which, as mentioned before, the difficulty level of this event was actually on the quite impressive level. You had the regular level, which was achievable after understanding the basic strategy that you needed to apply. The rigorous level was in fact hard. Well, maybe not necessarily the level itself, but definitely one of the missions that was added to that level made it an absolute challenge. With many other previous game modes, I praised the inclusion of a wide spread of difficulty levels. So that way, casual players and high-skilled competitive players both can enjoy the game mode. And with Operational Overlord, that feat has been achieved once again. It is great to see that Wargaming has seemingly mastered this element to almost all of their special game mode, which includes PvE gameplay. I already have explained the general overview of the operation, but let's take a closer look to some detailed features, starting off with the map, which is a recycled form of the Overlord map replicating the atmosphere of the Normandy landings. The map gradually opens up as you can move past some of the dead zones, or the red marked zones, where you could get destroyed quite easily if you traverse in those zones. It is a good method to keep the map open without blocking off large parts, which they only did by decreasing the size of the map border, forcing you to drive a certain path but still maintaining enough terrain that you are used to from the random battle. Of course, most optimally, I want to see new maps or new map ideas that can be implemented into the game later on, but given Wargaming's track record of new maps, it might be for the best to recycle the existing older ones. Another feature was of course the vehicle that you are playing, the almost historically accurate M4A3E8 Sherman. A good all-round vehicle to play with, but I really missed other choices of vehicles to pick. Changing up the strategy of the operation if you could instead pick a Churchill or a ARL or a PDR or Sherman M4A1 to increase the difficulty with a lower tier vehicle. Rewards! So the rewards you could earn were quite basic: credits, bonds, free XP and battle pass points. You could also get some nice 2D styles inspired by the events of D-Day, and finally a medal if you could complete the rigorous difficulty level. Not much to add here, always nice to have the additional bonds and free XP, and also great that the special game mode still progresses your battle pass. So with that look back out of the way, quite the short one this time, what are my thoughts of these types of PvE solo modes for the future? Well, I think these game modes can really be refreshing once in a while. It can get tedious if you repeat it a lot, or the time duration is longer, in which the missions and rewards also will take longer to achieve, much like what happened with Frontline. But honestly, I think these types of game modes are still going to be extremely rare, only reserved for major celebrations. With this game mode for the 80-year anniversary of D-Day, and before that only the home front mode as the odd one out, but the convoy mode as the last one before, for the 100th anniversary of tank combat. Of course, with the convoy mode we got introduced to wheeled vehicles, but I haven't seen any new features within the Operation Overlord. The map already exists, the tanks already exist, the artillery fire ability and the minefields. So there are no new implementations that we can directly see, which we might expect to be added in the game later on. Maybe a couple of indirect things, like the AI seems to be a new kind of development. Well, we see it happening everywhere, but I believe it's the first time we actively see it played out in a World of Tanks game mode, or at least mentioned here in this World of Tanks game mode. I really haven't noticed any difference or really paid attention to the AI allies. To me, they still kind of play out like your regular bots, just go to a position and fire and maybe see cover. It's still very basic, but maybe over the years AI with machine learning can develop some more skill, but hopefully that skill will be contained within their own modes, because giving AI enough time and it can actually play at the level of a Unicum player, and if that code gets leaked out, it's going to get a lot harder to detect bot activity or, well, non-player activity if it gets leaked into the random queue. So, one big warning right there. And the final thing is the Sherman Crab, the Sherman Minesweeper, which was a new version of the Sherman, which I haven't seen before. But I think it's a too niche tank to introduce as a premium, although it might become a premium with a ridiculous amount of spaced armor. I mean, we also got the shuffle pattern tank, so maybe another meme tank, I guess? Well, at least I give them that. And with that, that's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Laters.